Hey everyone, my name is Jude and I'll be taking you through a demo of Code Wizard. So before we get started, let me just give you a quick idea of how Code Wizard works. Let's say you have an idea for an application and you've generated a few requirements. You take these requirements and you convert it into the form of a design. It could be a UML model or a flowchart. And then this design is pushed into Code Wizard. So Code Wizard gives you the ability to choose tech stack, screens, front-end application, back-end application, or a full stack application. And then Code Wizard generates this design into code. So 40 to 70% of compiler ready code is generated to your GitHub. And from here, you can add business logic or you can modify the code the way you need it. So here let's take an example of an application called FundFlow where you manage funding rounds for various startups and you add a lead investor. So let's say this has an admin and the admin will want to create and manage startups. Number one, the admin would want to move the startups from one stage to another. They would want to manage funding rounds. They would want to view and assign lead investors. They would also want to update the post funding valuation of the startup. They'd want to assign founders to the startup and manage the various stages. They'd also want to manage investors, so that would be like creating investors and adding more information. So let me just show you how this application looks like. Here we have the startup page where we talk about the startups. Here is how you can add all the startups, the name, the industry, the founders, you can give it the stage. So for now I've added two stages, the valuation, everything. And if we go back, we can see the investors. So here we have the name of the investor, the contact number, the portfolio size. So these investors can be assigned to a startup. So let me show you the stage of how we can manage the stage. Here we have pre-seed and seed. If you want to add more stages, this is how we can do it. Give it a description and a criteria for the next stage. And this is how we can manage the funding rounds of the startup. So this is how we add a startup to the funding round. First, the startup has to be created and then all necessary information is given. So here only Code Wizard is created, and here are how we can assign the lead investors. So now let me take you through the design model and show you how we can generate this application. So this here is the design model. So here you can see there are multiple APIs like startup, stage, founder, and document. So under startup, we have different entities like industry, founding date, contact number. So all the relevant information that we need under each of these APIs. And now this design model will help us create the backend application, which in turn we can use to integrate with the front end application. So now let me show you how many screens you require. So we would require a table screen like we saw for the investor and the stages. Then we would also require a simple form to edit the information in these stages, investors, and the funding round. A tiles to look at all the startups that we have. A list to again manage the funding rounds, and a one-to-many form to manage the startups and add more information. So this here is the home page of Code Wizard. Here I'll show you how to create the projects, the backend and the front end project, and how it's integrated. So let me create a backend project and name it FundFlow BE. Here I can upload my design. So if I go to your design, I can browse from my device, upload the model, give it a version and select the industry. I hit save, and then you can see that the model has been updated. It's been selected, and now I can click the backend, which is Springo data, the database, Postgres SQL, and select a few capabilities like Docker Compose and Dockerfile. Now I just review my basic details. Here you can see that the code will be pushed into the Code Wizard repo of GitHub. So you can add your own GitHub account in the settings later. Once I'm happy, I can confirm and hit generate app. So while the app is generating, it will also generate test cases, a Postman collection, and selected capabilities, as well as the code will be integrated with the database and pushed to the GitHub. Once the code has been generated, this is the page that we would come to. Here we can view the code and deploy and run. So let's view the code first. Here it is pushed into GitHub, and you can see the Docker Compose and the Docker files. So here, if I just expand a bit more into the source, and let me show you the model files. So here we can see everything that has been created, the funding round, the founder, the investors, about the startup. And if I go to test, I can also see all the test files that has been created, like the Postman collection and so on. Now let me go ahead and deploy the application. You can see that the GitHub URL is there. So once that the code has been successfully generated, this is the message that we would get. So you just click on the link and here you can see the metadata of the backend API. Now this will help us integrate it with the front-end project. So let's quickly create one and name it FunFlow FE. So once created, let's select our front end. So we have our API running, that is the FunFlow BE. Now let's select the screens that we need. So like mentioned, we'll require forms, list, table, tile, and one-to-many. Now to view these screens, it's a simple click and you can enlarge these screens. You can also browse through other screens that you might require for your application. So here was the list and here is the table. Now to configure these screens based on how you need it, we just click configure screens. So this is our configurator, and here to the right you can see all the screens that we have added. Here we can duplicate and rename how many of our screens that we need. So let me quickly rename and duplicate all the screens. So I'll need a couple of table screens, so let me name it investor and stage. For the form layout, let me have 3 forms. So one would be manage investor, the other one would be manage stages, and the final one is to manage the funding rounds. Then the list screen will be for the funding rounds. The tile screen is to show the startup, so let me just name it as startup. And the one-to-many layout, I will need to manage the startups and add information about the founders, so let me name it as manage startups. So once I finish renaming everything, I can select the screens one by one. You can also see that the name has been shown on the top left. Here to the top right, I can just select the API and I can see the fields from the selected API. I'll remove the fields that I don't need, so I don't want the investor ID, and I'll just hit save. You can see the green tick that comes up once your file has been saved. Again, let me do the same for the stage. Remove anything that I don't need and save it. Now I will do the same for all the other screens that I need. So for the manage investor, it's a simple form. So let me add all the information I would want to see in this form. I'll do the same with the manage stage and the manage funding rounds. So let me fast forward this process so I don't bore you. Again, here I'm just adding all the required information that I want into these forms, like the logos, where the information will show, the tables and all that. Now let me rename the company name to FunFlow. Let me quickly upload an icon. And once that's done, all I need to do is map these pages to the left hand side menu. So let me select the page name and give it a simple URL. I also have the option to add icons to this. So let me quickly do it for all 4 pages. So once I'm happy with all my selections, I can just hit return to code wizard. Configurator shows that everything's been created successfully. So I go back and now again I select the capabilities that I need, review the basic details, again see where it's being pushed to and hit confirm. So once we hit confirm, you can see that the backend API URL is there. And once we are happy with everything, just hit generate app. So here as the code is being pushed, the code is being generated for the capabilities and it is being integrated with the backend and now it will be pushed to the GitHub. So let me deploy and run the code first, as it'll take a few seconds, then use that to look at the code. Here we can see that the Docker files are there, the Docker compose and so on. So let me go to source, look at the screens that we have made. So here you can see all the screens, the investor, the founder, the stage, everything. So if you go to the details, we can see we can create, edit and view all these forms. Now let me just go to the configurator, the config, and check the index, and here we can see that the backend API URL is also there. So all this is React code. Yep, so once everything is ready, you can see our app URL has been generated. So now we can go and check out the app that has been generated by Code Wizard. So as you know, there has been 0 code written for this. Now this app has no information. So let's start by adding, the stages. So here are the stages we have. Let me just add a couple of stages to begin with. Quickly add a description for the pre-seed stage. and then I'll give it a criteria. I'll follow the same steps to create a seed stage. Now here you can see both the stages have been added. Now let me go ahead and follow the same steps to add an investor. So just hit the plus button, give it a name, his contact number and his portfolio size. Now these are just random information I'm showing you for the purpose of this demo. So here I've added a couple of investors. Now let me go ahead and create a startup. I upload a logo for the startup. Just give relevant information like the name, the industry, the founding date, phone number, whatever valuation. Here, because I've created the stages, I can also add its stage, and now I can give information about the startup's founder. And I just save it. And if we go to the startup section, here we see our startup has been created. We can edit, view and delete the startup, or also add more information or add more startups as we need. Now to manage the funding rounds, let's just go to funding round. Click on upload. So since the startup has already been created, we can just give it a logo again. Select the round type. Since this is everything related to the funding, all information being requested is about the funding over here. And here we can see how the funding round has been created. So we can do this for multiple startups. And here is how we've created a simple application with almost no code. And we've done it in less than a few hours. So before I end the demo, I'd just like to show you how much one would save through cost, time and effort. So we here have developed 8 screens with 40 API endpoints, and that would manually take you about 79 hours plus 45 hours, so which is around 124 hours. And through Code Wizard, we did it not more than 40 to 60 minutes. So if you look at it in Indian pricing with $10 an hour, it would cost you $2,490, whereas with Code Wizard, it would cost you only $500, giving you an ROI of 80%. Similarly, with the US pricing of $25 an hour, this would cost you around $6,000. Again, the same with Code Wizard, just $500, giving you a greater ROI of 92%. So I'd like to thank you all for watching. Hope you all have a great day.